Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserloh.
We welcome you back into the Four Tire Change podcast, ESPN Southwest Louisiana sports station. What a first month of the season it has been. We did not anticipate a back-to-back-to-back winner, but that's what we have. And for the first time this year, friend of the program, Chris Fusaro joins us to kind of recap what we've had going on this entire first month of the season. A lot of ups and downs. And Chris, here we are.
Dawson, thanks for having me on. Great to be back with you and be back with the listeners in Lafayette and surrounding metropolitan Lafayette areas.
Okay, so look, let's start back to the beginning of the season here, Daytona 500. And I want to ask you about the controversies in officiating. It's become a bit of a theme here with NASCAR this season. Not only do you have the lack of a caution called at the end of the 500, that carried over. You saw more of the same, kind of controversial one way or the other at Atlanta. You saw a car disqualified after the 500, penalized significantly, then overturned eventually. There's just been a lot, and it unfortunately takes away, I think, from what's been some exciting racing. The last couple of weeks have been a nice drift away from that. Phoenix didn't have any big drama, but what did you make of all the officiating controversies in the first month of the season?
NASCAR tries to be a sport closer to boxing at times where it's judgment based, and I don't think that's right. I think a lot of the sport should be earned on the track, and the results should speak for themselves. And there should be, I understand when you're involving equipment and whatnot that there are situational based decisions, right? But they just need to stick to one thing and go with it. There needs to be some science behind when to throw a caution flag on the white flag lap. There needs to be some threshold of points docked when a driver and a team are penalized. There needs to be a certain X amount of evidence in an appeal for it to be overturned. I don't know. It's just too judgment based to me at times.
I would fully agree with that. And it's funny too, like they have power in their hands, which I understand. But then at the same time, it feels like at times they try to put it back in the driver's hands and it's back and forth. And like you said, you have to have the biggest thing, to compare it to baseball. What would you say about an umpire? If he's off the plate given a strike, at least he's given it consistently. We know what we're getting. It's the problem is when you don't know as a pitcher what a strike is. And right now I feel like a lot of NASCAR drivers don't know what a strike is. Am I allowed to be aggressive here? And look, the Eric Almirola thing in the Xfinity Series, I can't even really believe it's being talked about. But based on some of the decisions NASCAR did last year, you have to look up and go, wait a minute, is this something that's going to be allowed? Now, they didn't penalize him or anything. But I think it's crazy where that line was always existed, and now I think it moves around more so than maybe it ever has.
Oh, and also like Ty Gibbs right hooking Ty Dillon at Circuit of the Americas. It's like every other NASCAR driver the past 5 years that has right hooked a guy has gotten suspended. Just because you turned left and you turned right at a track, that's not a suspension anymore. Maybe just come out and say, hey, you can do this at an oval, but you can't do this at a road course. I don't know. There's just too much of a middle ground at times that leaves you wondering, it leaves analysts of the sport wondering, and leaves people that been in the sport for 30, 40 years wondering what they're going to get on a weekly basis.
Let's talk about some stuff that's more fun to talk about than officiating decisions. Christopher Bell, man. I've been on the Bell train for a while now. A lot of people have. Like, it's no surprise that he's gotten to this point. But to win 3 in a row and also to do it at 3 vastly different racetracks. I mean, you're talking about a borderline super speedway in Atlanta. Then he goes to the road course and gets it done at Dakota. Now Phoenix. I mean, really everything you can imagine. I know it's almost even a little bit feeble to say playoff front runner, all that stuff. We know the system. Look, you have to be running your best at the end of the season to win a championship. So I don't know if it really means that much for the championship. But what it does mean is Christopher Bell he's taken himself out of that area of question. In my mind, he's one of the premier drivers in the sport. And to be honest with you, a driver that is right there that I would compare him to in William Byron, that's somebody he's compared to often, right? They're similar age. I think he's separated himself significantly from Byron recently. Not to say Byron can't get there, but I've just been so impressed with what Bell's done. And ironically, Byron's still the points leader, even with all the Bell's accomplished.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Byron is obviously a very good driver. He's won back-to-back Daytona 500s, but he's peaked early in the season the past 2, 3 years. Whereas Christopher Bell has been right there, a playoff contender. Not to say William Byron's not a playoff contender, especially in the playoffs he has made the championship for, but it never felt like he could truly win a championship, right? Christopher Bell, you've showed up to Phoenix the past 3 years. You feel like he's a guy that can really do it. and you're right on the fact that he's won on various different tracks. I think he's maybe the most complete driver in the sport right now. I would still say that Joey Logano, yeah, he's a three-time champion, probably the best driver in the sport. I'm not a Joey Logano guy, but I have to give credit where credit's due.
I
He's
can't
always
believe you
there. He's
said that.
always around. Yeah, it does pay me to say it. Maybe this time last year, the year before, I would have said Kyle Larson. I think Kyle Larson has too many holes right now.
It's been a slump,
I think
right?
Kyle Larson could be yeah, he might be a mile and a half guy. And good thing that there's 10 to 12 mile and a halves that NASCAR goes to on an annual basis. So maybe Christopher Bell can be that complete guy. I don't know. Joey Logano wins on all types of tracks. Maybe Christopher Bell can be that.
Yeah, and like Tyler Reddick was my next guy up where I wondered if he was going to emerge and if at this time, this year we were going to be thinking of him in that light. And he just hasn't quite been able to be a finisher. I think the 45 team runs well enough, but Christopher Bell has now put it together and figured out how to finish races along with running really well. And that's like you said, it's interesting too. Like for whatever reason, you got guys like Larson and Reddick who are so consistent elsewhere, but also they both struggle a lot at the super speedways, which we have more of now that Atlanta's been introduced. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. And that's my next question to you. You see some teams, and it's funny. Like I haven't felt like Chase Elliott's had a great start to the season. Yet he's fifth in points. There's such a difference nowadays, especially with stage points, where you can have this feeling. And again, like who would expect Christopher Bell not to be the points leader? He's won 3 out of the 4 races, but he's not because William Byron's been able to grab some stage points here and there. And I know Bell had one bad finish, but it is interesting to me to look up and see a guy like Tyler Reddick. I go, man, it hasn't been a great Tyler Reddick season. So, but yet he's third in points, and Chase Elliott's fifth, and Ryan Blaney's fourth, and none of them have really threatened for wins all that often. You've had a race here and there, but that's just how the point system's just a lot different than it used to be.
That and there's been, especially from the 9 team and the 12 team, some really resilient days. I think Chase Elliott said it after Coda's like, can we just have a normal day? And I think they finally got a normal day at Phoenix. And I would argue the same thing for Ryan Blaney. And then they blew up at Phoenix. In the Daytona 500, I thought they were the front runner for most of that race. They get torn up with 10, 12 laps to go. They rattle back for a top 10. So I think the cream of the crop of the sport rises and through those adverse situations, right? Like Tyler Reddick, they've had adverse situations through 4 races. They've been all over the place, but he's third points. So I would say Joey Logano's been that way. I would point to even Kyle Larson. Like it hasn't been pretty for them either. So, but all these teams, the cream of the crop, they rise to the top. I think the middle of the pack, which could be very interesting, of the Bubba Wallaces, the Ty Gibbs, even though he's had a very poor start to the year, Chase Briscoe, Chris Buescher. When are one of those guys gonna win a race, make a move? I don't know. I'm very interested to see who that middle tier ends up being this year of a guy like Chris Buescher who could win a playoff race or two and make it to the championship four.
I do want to talk about the upcoming schedule in a bit, but before we get to that, I wanted to go back to this week. It's been the buzz, right? Phoenix. I was vastly impressed with the option tire and what Goodyear did. I know it's been a kind of a bit of a hot topic. Some people are really for it. Some people are really against it, think it's gimmicky. I don't see it like that. I see it like, let's get some strategy back into some of these racetracks that have become, look, and I almost think the optimization of data and strategy has almost made it less entertaining, where everybody can plug stuff into a computer and say, well, the best strategy is to pit on this lap or to do this. I like that this tire added more variation into that. And, look, if Ty Dillon won the race, would we been having a different conversation? Maybe so, but I wouldn't have hated it. Like, I've been like, you know what? He went completely against the grain and he found a way to do something different. So for me, I thought the option tire was an overwhelming success. I know some people don't feel that way. How do you feel?
It made a very boring track entertaining, right? I don't know why anybody would complain about something that enhances that without digging out the surface. So I don't know. I feel like some people will find a way to complain about something. I would be interested to see if that was the primary tire and how would things shake out from there because there's a strategy, right? So somebody's on an option tire, they could go from 20th to third in 10 laps, it seemed like. And it totally flips the script of the race for them, at least. And if they go back onto the standard tire, which they had a bigger quantity of, and they're back to where they started. So I'd be interested to see a full race of nothing but that option tire.
Lastly, here, as we look forward a little bit, Chris Fusaro joining us here on the Four Tire Change. The next segment is interesting. We're going to start to, I think, see a lot more of who's got the raw speed this year. You go to Las Vegas this weekend, Homestead right after that, Martinsville the following week, and then it's Darlington to start the month of April. So some more of your traditional tracks here. And we haven't really even been to a traditional mile and a half, right? Because we know Atlanta races a little differently now. So Las Vegas is really our first full look at that. I'm taking a look at those Hendrick cars for sure. I feel like you're going to start to see some more speed out of them. I think they're always the strongest. You talked about Larson. Maybe we see a Larson sighting. I do think there's a good chance Chase Elliott runs up front. There's a couple teams that have really been struggling and probably need good finishes. I'll be interested to see what RFK does over the next couple of weeks. You've had certainly a lot of mixed results from Gibbs. I mean, Christopher Bell's won 3 out of the 4 races, and yet awful start for Ty Gibbs, as you talked about. Chase Briscoe, all the penalty drama. Now he gets his points back, but he's still not running great. There's some really interesting storylines that are going to play out as we go to the traditional tracks and really kind of find out who has the most speed week in and week out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll sort of set the stage for the rest of the year in a way. I think with a few short tracks in there, like you mentioned, Martinsville, Darlington, Bristol, that little stretch, that could that could tell you a lot, especially as we get into the second half of the year. We're going back to those places for a second time as well. Who's gonna, we've seen the super speedways, we've seen 2 races on that. The road course you can sort of just throw out in a way, and then at Phoenix, it's a short track, it's a short track package, but it doesn't race like these other short tracks in a way. It's very different. So I think we'll see the cream rise to the top, and we'll see who those players in the middle tier that I talked about are as well.
It'll be fun to watch it play out, Chris. Let's at least give picks for Las Vegas this weekend. I'm picking Kyle Larson. I said it there. I think you start to see the 5 teams gotta show something soon here. So I think they do it. I think they kind of show you that they're still the dominant mile and a half car. Who you got?
I don't want to pick the same person as you because I did have Kyle Larson in my head. I'll go the 12 car, Brian Blaney. Give me, they've had, like I said, they've had some crazy adverse situations. They've blown up, they've gotten torn up, still got a top 10 out of it. I think Blaney can sort of pick up some of that Penske speed that they've shown. They haven't gotten any good finishes out of it really from any of them. But I think that they've showed speed. They showed speed on the super speedways. They show speed at the road course as well. Things went very poor for them at Phoenix, I feel like, but give me Blaney.
Yeah, and you know what? Shout out Josh Berry, top 5 finish at Phoenix, showing some life out of that Wood Brothers car. It's been too long since the 21 ran up front, so maybe this is going to be the start of something for Josh Berry and his team. All right, Chris, appreciate you doing this, man. We'll catch up again soon. We'll do this. We'll do this monthly throughout the season.
All right, sounds good, Dawson. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for Four Tire Change. Continue to like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back next week. Big time week. NASCAR headed to Las Vegas.